First of 3 lessons on the analysis of a primary source. So the question comes up now, what is a primary source? Well, a primary source could be any number of things. Most of us are already familiar with a number of primary sources. It could be a piece of paper, a document. It could be something an archaeologist may dig out of the ground. It could be a painting. It could be a speech. It could be an interview. In this particular case, we're going to be taking a look at what's in the background here. Photographs. Photographs from a specific period of time and a very specific event. But what we're going to do in this particular lesson is I'm going to model for you how to interpret a photograph to find its historical context. And you are then going to do it yourself using an optional, you have a choice of 2 optional forms. And if you want to just use the method that I use on the screen, that's fine too. So bottom line, you have 3 different methods to use to try to analyze a particular photograph. So by the end of this lesson, which by the end of this module, I should say, you will be able to identify at least 6 significant historical details from a series of photographs and write a script of an imaginary conversation between 3 people who played a role in the Bread and Roses strike of 1912. So let's get started. The first one that we're going to take a look at is this photograph. So when I come across a primary source like this, first thing I have to do is I have to pose a question. Then I'm going to gather some clues. I'm going to get some background information. And then I'm going to draw a conclusion. So first off, let's pose a question. I'm wondering, what are these people doing? Well, they're clearly not family members. But they do know one another. They're posed. You can see that. That's clear. They're all female. And it looks like they're probably in some sort of work area. If you take a look at their clothing, they're certainly not posed for a family photo or a staged photo or a prearranged photo. They are in their work clothes, and it looks like if you take a look at the background, you can see some working equipment. So if you take a look at this now, you can see, okay, we have some 30-something, perhaps 40-something, I doubt it though, women. Now, they're dressed in work clothes and they're in some sort of factory. Now, you can also read into their faces some emotions. Do they look happy? No, they don't. You can see clearly that they're not happy. You see some trying to get some sort of semblance of a smile, but this one in the front, in the foreground particularly strikes me. She's not smiling at all, and she has this loneliness to her, this almost despair. This does not look like a photograph that expresses a time of joy in the least. It's one of frustration, a lot of pain, and almost something that they can't escape from. So what this photograph is in fact of is women who work in a mill in Lawrence, Massachusetts at the beginning of the 20th century, circa 1912. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at how you could break down a particular photograph. Now, this particular document, be a historical detective, investigate documents. You pretend you're a historian examining primary source documents, visual or text. Based on your close examination of the documents and the knowledge you bring to them, what deductions can you make about the event, issue, and/or period? So here we have observation. You write all the things you see in the document. No interpretation yet. You don't try to make any judgment yet. Then you use your knowledge. What do you know from prior experience, study, assumptions, intuitions? And then finally, you try to get some sort of deduction. What can you infer or conclude? Now, when you're done with all of those, what new questions do the documents raise? What else would you need to know? And this, of course, comes from a Picturing Modern America classroom resource. The second form that you have the option of using is from the National Archives, the U.S. government, right here. Now, some of this may be a bit cut off to you, but we have step 1, observation. You study the photograph for about 2 minutes, you form an overall impression of the photograph, and then examine individual items. Next, you divide the photo into quadrants and study each section to see what new details become invisible. Visible, not invisible. And so a quadrant, quad, 4. Top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. And you use the chart below to list people, objects, and activities in the photograph. But people, objects, and activities. And inference. Based on what you have observed above, list 3 things that you might infer from this photograph. And you're not exposed to the photograph as of yet, but you will. What question does this photograph raise in your mind? Okay, there are all sorts of questions that should come to the front when you take a look at the next photograph. And where can you find answers to them? And again, this was designed and developed by the education staff at the National Archives. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to take a look at is the photograph itself. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is pay particular attention to what he is wearing, the age of the subject, the clothes that he's wearing, the background. Take a look at the buildings, take a look at the street, the sidewalk, and black and white, urban setting, rural setting, posed, action shot. Does the person know that they're getting their picture taken? And what do you think this particular photograph tells you? Okay? What you think it tells you, there are no right or wrong answers, but ultimately there are right and wrong answers about where it was taken, when it was taken. But if you follow this, pose a question, gather clues, get background information, and draw a conclusion, or if you use the 2 forms that I had explained to you in the previous slides, you'll be just fine. So, what do you need to do? Well, photographs can often tell you more than you think. And prior to the next lesson in the module, you will answer the following with the use of your prior knowledge on immigration and industrialization history. Who do you think this boy was, and what was his role in the Bread and Roses strike of 1912? If you have any questions, please, to communicate me through email or talk to me in class tomorrow. And I hope you enjoyed Lesson 1.